The end of ownership and the rise of usership, seeing people, not purchases. I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Teen Zuo. He is the co-founder and CEO of Zuora and author of the book, Subscribed. Welcome, Teen.
Thanks, Tanya. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So what does Zuora do?
Well, we are a software company, and so we feel like a Salesforce.com or a NetSuite or a Workday or a Microsoft Office. But what we do is we help companies that have a subscription-based business model where their primary business model is offering a service to their customers. This could be companies like a Salesforce itself, like a Wall Street Journal or an HBO. But increasingly, what we're finding is all businesses are shifting to subscription-based business models, and we are the company that powers this entire so-called subscription economy.
So explain what you mean by subscription economy.
Well, you're probably noticing, and I certainly notice this as well, that every day that passes, I'm buying less and less stuff, right? I don't really need to buy things anymore. If I want to get from point A to point B, if I want, a few hours of entertainment around music or movies, if I need to do some work, I'm simply pulling up my phone, pulling up my laptop, pulling up my browser and tapping into services to meet my everyday needs. And so we call this whole idea of not having to buy products, but using services, a subscription economy. And the really interesting thing about this is transforming the way businesses operate today. Businesses are realizing that their customers, they don't want to deal with the hassles of product ownership. They don't want to have to deal with, when does my car need to be maintained? Does it have any oil? They don't want to deal with servers if they're dealing with software, right? They simply want to have what they want, when they want it, and they want a service to really meet those needs. And this is transforming businesses today.
When did this transition actually occur? I mean, it seems like it kind of snuck up on us gradually.
It definitely snuck up on us gradually. So my company Zuora, we've been around for about 10 years. And before this, I was at Salesforce.com, right? A company that's known for really transforming the entire software sector using this subscription-based business model. I was one of the first employees there. I was there about the first 9 years. And so if you fast forward to 2007, the question for us and my co-founders, which are from a company called WebEx, was to say, the subscription-based business model, is that just really something that's a software thing, right? Or could it really transform all industries? And we talked about movies, we talked about cars. We looked at an early example of movies, which was the early version of Netflix, when all they were doing was sending out DVDs. But we saw, there's about 1 million people at the time that just had stopped buying movies. They stopped buying movies, they stopped buying DVDs. Why buy a DVD where you can get access to the entire library for just $20 a month? And we talked to folks, places like San Francisco and New York that weren't buying cars anymore, right? Why buy cars if you can tap into a service like Zipcar? And this was an early version of Uber and Lyft, and this idea that you don't need to own a car. You can walk up to a car, you can swipe a card, and drive the car wherever you want, and simply pay based on the number of miles, right? And then Uber and Lyft took that concept and took it to a whole new level. And so we said, this whole subscription-based business model thing, its technologies gets better, right? When we started the company, the iPhone had just come out; it wasn't yet popular, and so that transformation hadn't even existed. But we look now today in 2018, mobile phones, cloud services, always on connectivity, right? AI, all these things. And one of the biggest transformations of all that we've seen is IoT, where every product is now a smart product. And the manufacturer that used to sell the product, whether it's a car, whether it's a thermostat, whether it's a tractor, one of our customers is Caterpillar, is saying, gosh, I'm going to still sell the product, but now I see all these services that I can sell along with the product. And this is pushing every company to move into the subscription economy.
You mentioned Netflix. Early in their history, yeah. Netflix almost closed their doors. And so talk about that and what that transition was like.
Well, you mentioned that we have a book now. This is one of the stories that we love to tell in the book. And you're absolutely right. Early days, Netflix's original model was the same model. How do I sell more products? And I'm gonna rent you the DVD. You're gonna pay by the DVD. And they realized that it was really, really hard to compete with Blockbuster, right? Why wait in the mail when I could just drive down the street and get that movie right now? And they said, the way we're going to transform this is we'll just let the customer hold as many DVDs as they want. And not try to rent it on a daily basis. Just pay us $20 a month on a subscription basis. You can get access to any movie you want and any, up to 3 or 4 movies a month. And this is what transformed the company. This is when they hit on a secret of how to hit what the customer really needs in a better way that the product-based business models can do. And when they switched this business model, it really just started taking off. And then when, bandwidth got better, when you can actually stream movies to people's iPads, laptops, or even TVs, then their business just rocketed, and they grew from 1 million to 10 million, and now over 130 million subscribers today.
So tell us about your new book, Subscribed. What's the thesis?
Well, so what we started noticing is we've been talking about the subscription-based business model for the 10 years the company's been in existence. The first few years, right, people said, okay, well, is this really going to happen? Or really people going to really stop buying stuff, right? This idea of not owning things was kind of a foreign concept, and we're getting more and more used to this. I think the millennials even grew up in this type of generation, so they've never had to really own anything at all. And so what we're finding is companies saying, okay, I can see this. I can see the power of the subscription-based business model because I hear the stories of Salesforce. I hear the stories of Netflix. And by the way, my customers are increasingly asking for these things. They want services. They don't want to have to deal with the hassles of product ownership. And on top of that, there's been so many successes now in the public markets that Wall Street is really starting to fall in love with this model, right? Every software company that goes public these days, including ourselves, we went public earlier this year, is a subscription-based business model. Companies like Stitch Fix that have gone public are subscription-based business models. And so you have this combination of it's a better model, our customers are asking for it, Wall Street is preferring this business model. And so the whole world is starting to shift. And so companies are coming to us and saying, okay, we get it, but we need help, right? We've been thinking for the last 10, 20, 100, 150 years of how to sell products. How do we make this transition to think about how to become a subscription business? Because it turns out this is not a simple change. This requires a wholesale transformation of how you build product, how you do sales, how you do marketing. Even your whole financial model starts to be different. And so we said, look, we've been holding these events where we bring these companies together to talk about this change. And we've taken really the learnings and the stories. And we wrote this book really to inspire companies and to guide them on how to do this transition.
So you mentioned being an early employee at Salesforce. In fact, you were employee number 11, and
Right.
they were one of the companies to get it right early on. And you've also mentioned a lot that have come since then. I mean, there's Stitch Fitch, Netflix, Blue Apron, which I just had a delivery of. So
Sure.
clearly there are businesses that are understanding what that looks like. So what did Salesforce get that other software companies didn't, or other businesses?
Well, so first off, I mean, Salesforce is just a huge success. It's something that I certainly am proud of being that team that created it. And when we look at it now, it looks like it was a foregone story, right? A foregone success story. But in the early days, it wasn't easy, right? It wasn't easy to really figure out how to make the subscription-based business model work. And we talked about how to build product, right? We all came from the software cycle where you spent all this money, all this effort, and 2-year product release cycles to release a version of a product and hope that it was right. It's not that different than, say, Hollywood, right? That spends $100 million, $200 million in a movie, and they hope that it does well. And what we realized when we launched our first service is we could actually see what our customers were doing. I mean, what tabs did they click on? What features do they use? How often they logged in, right? Were they using the reporting system at all? And we said, what we need to do is we need to just constantly iterate. And so one of the themes that we talk about in the book is to say, well, how do you have this always in beta or mindset, right? Where you're constantly iterating on your product, you're seeing what your customers are using, you're taking their customer information into tweaking the system. And so we talked about the story of Fender guitars, right? To kind of take it from the software story to something we're all familiar with, guitars. Well, what if guitar manufacturers can actually see how often you play and actually make their service better? And so what Fender realized when they took this view is, they're selling a lot of guitars to first-time buyers. I think over half their guitars are sold to first-time buyers. But 90% of the people that buy a guitar, they're not playing 1 year out. They quit at month 3, month 4, month 5. And so there's not this continuation of the guitar buyer. Now, if they're still playing at month 12, that guitar player will probably play for life. And they're going to buy a lot more guitars. They're going to buy a lot more picks. They're going to buy a lot more amps. And so the way they wanted to grow their revenues was not to sell, it's not about selling more guitars. It's about holding on to their customers And so they built this whole digital offering of tuning systems and how to learn how to play the guitar so they can actually see how their customers are progressing in that journey. And where they're sort of falling short, how can we reach out to them, right? Here's a new guitar lick from U2 or Bob Marley or One Republic that you might want to learn, and sort of keep that passion alive until you overcome that learning hump and you become a guitar lover for life. And so this is a whole new way of thinking about business that we really try to bring out in the book to inspire the next generation of companies to do what Salesforce has done, to do what Stitch Fix has done, to do what Netflix has done.
You work with a lot of historic brands, brands that have been around a very long time who you wouldn't imagine would want to change. But so how should a business change their thinking about their customers? I mean, what paradigm shift needs to happen in the boardroom to embrace subscription approach?
So we have a diagram in the book that seems to be the diagram that's most popular. When I talk to folks who read the book, they always refer back to that diagram. And on the left side, we have the traditional business model. It starts with the product, and the goal of the business is to sell as many units of that product as possible, right? If you boil down a 2-year MBA program, it's basically that, right? Buy the biggest factory, buy the biggest number of trucks, and then generate as many unit sales as possible. That brings down, you spread your fixed costs over as many units, brings down the marginal costs, and that's the basis of competition. So let's take these products, let's put in as many channels as we can, let's put it into the hands of salespeople, let's put into as many retail shelves, right, as we can, let's get an e-commerce site going, and whoever sells the most unit wins. The other diagram to contrast it with starts with the customer. And it says, where are the customers spending their time? They're spending their time in the stores, they're spending their time talking to my people, they're spending their time on their phone or on their computers. And how do we deliver them an experience around that? And it's a completely different way of thinking of the business. And so Apple, as an example, in their recent earnings calls, they're telling Wall Street, stop obsessing over how many phones I sell. It doesn't matter. Know that I have over 1 billion Apple IDs, and I have all sorts of ways of monetizing those Apple IDs, right? They can walk into the store and pick up a new phone. They can have more storage. They can buy more music. In fact, 30-40% of my revenues today are already from services, digital services that are not part of the original phone sale. And that is my new business model. And you think about, let's talk about Amazon versus Walmart, right? Amazon actually knows who their customers are. You can log in to Amazon with your Amazon ID, just like your Apple ID, and you can see every single transaction you've ever done with Amazon, including the original book you probably purchased if you started using Amazon when they were just a bookstore. Now, turns out 100 million people, it's like a third of the US population, walks into a Walmart every 2 weeks to buy something. But there's no Walmart ID. Walmart doesn't know who they are. You swipe your credit card, you pay cash, you walk out. Walmart made the sale, but there's no ongoing relationship. So where can Walmart go? Amazon can go and sell you music. Amazon can sell you an Echo. Amazon can sell you cloud storage. Right now in Whole Foods, Amazon can deliver you Whole Foods groceries. Right? So everything that Amazon does is tied around that Amazon ID. That is the relationship that they have with you. This is a completely different way of thinking. You look at Nike. There's no Nike ID. There's no Coke ID. Nike just wants to sell you more sneakers. Coke is just counting how many bottles or cans of Coke they sell. It's not an ongoing relationship where they can branch out from health or from beverages and really take over or add value to more and more of your life. It's a completely different way of thinking.
So is it too late for brands like Walmart who haven't been able to adapt to the subscription economy? I mean, Amazon Prime Day just happened, and they had, even with all of the site failures, one of their most successful days ever. So what happens to brands like Walmart who haven't yet got the picture that they need to be in a subscription economy?
Well, what happened with Amazon Prime Day just shows the power of these relationships, right? If you go to any other site, if the site is down, you're going to abandon it. You're not going to go back. But people have a relationship with Amazon to represent something. If the site is down, well, I'm still going to go back to Amazon because there's so much that they know about me, right? There's so much that they customize for me. It's a completely different experience. And so I'll forgive Amazon for a few glitches because the value that they provide is so great that I'm going to go back because that relationship is very, very valuable to me. Whether Walmart is it too late for big brands? I mean, what we found is we originally thought that. This is when we started the company 10 years ago, that it would be these disruptors, these Salesforce.coms, these Netflixes of the world that would actually disrupt their industries. But what we find is if the fundamental lesson of the subscription economy is to rethink your customers as subscribers, right? A customer is somebody that it's somebody potentially anonymous that bought your product, right? A subscriber is somebody you have an ongoing relationship with, and they're using your services, and hopefully they're expanding their use of your service, and the value that you have with them goes up over time. And so if the concept is rethink customers as subscribers, then these incumbent companies actually have the most subscribers, right? Coke actually has a lot more customers than a brand new energy drink startup. Nike has a whole bunch of customers. What these companies need to do now is to establish relationships with them. I want to see that Nike ID. I want to see that Coke ID. Walmart has done all these e-commerce acquisitions because they think the game is about e-commerce, but there's still no universal Walmart ID that defines my relationship with Walmart. I've got a Jet.com ID. I've got all these different brands. They're disconnected. It's not a cohesive experience. And so the companies that are really doing this right are introducing these cohesive experiences and then building that relationship with their customers and redefining these as subscriber relationships.
What about a heritage brand like Ford, where you have more and more people ditching the car and using a service like Uber? I mean, will people and businesses really stop wanting to own things they use and rely on every day?
I know the concept of not owning something feels weird, but once you experience these subscription services, there's no going back. Once you start using Salesforce, you don't go back and use products from SAP or Oracle or these on-premise applications that you have to deal with yourself, these non-cloud applications. And so Ford is realizing this. And so if you look at what Ford is talking about, is they're saying, we don't want to just be a car brand, we want to be a mobility brand. Our relationship with the customer is not just our experience with the customer. It's not when they step into the car, when they step out of it. They're trying to talk about experiences that go from bed to desk, right? Because the primary use of the car is commuting to work. And so when you wake up in the morning to when you're settled in at work, how do we own that entire experience? How do we anchor it on a Ford ID, which is your Ford Pass application? So how do we get everybody to use a Ford Pass application? And the first version of the Ford Pass application is do things like unlock your car, find out where it is, start it remotely if it's cold outside, right? But now you can go ahead and order these Ford Chariot buses, right, that take you from point A to point B. Now you can use it to go find a parking spot or pay for a parking spot, so it's all ready for you by the time you get to your destination. And so you're seeing them really, really evolve from being a car brand to a true mobility brand, a transportation brand that just simply gets you from point A to point B. We have a whole chapter in the book about how the whole transportation sector, planes, trains, automobiles, are being transformed into these services that people can tap into.
So is it really a competition? I mean, is there a winner between Ford and Uber?
The amazing thing about subscription services, you're not limited to one, right? As you cut your cord, people are finding that I'll sign up for Netflix and HBO, right? I'll use Uber or I'll use Lyft, and I can potentially use both. I'll use my business applications from Salesforce and I'll use it from Google. So I think there's room certainly for multiple vendors, right? That you can use in your personal life. But I think the winner here ultimately is the consumer. When you don't have to deal with these hassles, right? When you know what you want and there's a service that you can tap into it, you can pay just for what you use, right? You're not buying a $20,000, $50,000 car that sits idle 97% of the time, right? I think that's what the statistics say. This is a much better world for the consumer, and it's a much better world for us all.
Well, I'm not going to lie, Teen. I am a subscription junkie and I subscribe to just about everything. And your book is great. I think it's certainly a lesson for all brands and businesses out there that are trying to evolve into this subscription economy. I thank you for your time. If somebody wants to get a copy of your book or maybe connect with you personally, how can they do that?
Well, the book is available on places like Barnes & Nobles, right? Amazon.com, obviously. Do follow my Twitter or follow my company's Twitter. It's just my first name and last name. It's easy to find. Or just feel free to email me directly at ceo@zora.com.
And thank you again. And if you guys want to follow me and more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe connect with me by going to my website. It's tanyahall.net. I've got links to all my social channels, and I hope to hear from you. Thanks for watching.